Hello and welcome back to our third video on the Bible and the city. In our first two videos, we looked at two different time periods. The first, the book of Genesis, where aside from the almost hidden promise of the city of God in the Garden of Eden, the city is almost always shown to be an evil place and a place where evil people dwell. In our second video, when we discuss the city in the time period between the Exodus and the beginning of the Israelite monarchy, we see a promise in the law that there is a redemptive quality of cities. That is, that the Levites live there and that they are places of refuge. But in reality, we still see cities being inhabited by evil people, and therefore they become somewhat of an evil place. This really begins to change once we get to the period of the kings. Now, let me begin by giving you a short overview from the time of the kings all the way down to the birth of Jesus. In the 10th century BC, in the 900s, the people rise up to Samuel and say, "Give us a king." So God appoints Saul to be the first king of Israel. Saul was not a very good king, and he disobeyed God a lot. So while he was still alive, God rejects him and chooses David, the son of Jesse, to be his successor. Saul dies in battle. David consolidates the kingdom after a short while and then becomes the king over a united Israel. David's reign is portrayed as glorious. David conquers city after city, defeats all the enemies, and for the first time, Israel is secure from outside forces. They're secure from enemies from without. Now, they have enemies within because of David's sin, and God allowed his son Absalom to raise up a coup that was ultimately unsuccessful. But he still is the golden age of the king. And then David's son Solomon takes over upon his father's death, builds the temple, and is the wise man and the great ruler from all around. But Solomon had his weaknesses too. He intermarried with a lot of pagan women and brought a lot of idolatry into Israel in that regard. When Solomon dies, his kingdom is split because his foolish son will not listen to his advisors. And so 10 tribes split off and create the kingdom of Israel, headquartered in the Ephraimite city of Samaria, where the other two tribes, Judah and Benjamin, still call Jerusalem their capital, and they become the southern kingdom. For 200 years, this divided kingdom exists until the 8th century, in the 720s. After many years of threatening, Assyria finally comes and wipes out the northern kingdom, takes the people, carries them away, and they're never heard from again. The southern kingdom continues, although they get far worse and far deeper into idolatry until they are captured by the Babylonians in the early 6th century BC. In the 580s, Jerusalem falls, and everyone who is left is either killed or carried away into captivity in Babylon. The Babylonian captivity lasts about 70 years total. When Babylon falls to the Medo-Persians, Cyrus, the Persian king, allows the Israelites, any who want to go back and rebuild Jerusalem and rebuild the temple and go back and live there. Now, over a period of time, more and more Israelites return, but still most of the population remains in what is called diaspora, which means the dispersion. And the diaspora was very much an urban reality. The Jews who were displaced from Israel didn't begin to go other places and be farmers. They began to be city dwellers. So the Jewish population that lived outside of Israel from the 6th century BC onwards was very much an urban population. They later populated all the major cities of the Mediterranean and farther up inland, all the cities of Persia, Middle East, Babylon, and all up and down the Fertile Crescent. So the diaspora, or the dispersed Jews, became a very much urban reality, so that the Jews then went from being more rural and agricultural in the times of the conquest in the days of the judges, transitioned into more of a city life during the time of the kings, and then by the time of the diaspora became very much city dwellers. Some Israelites continued to live in and around Jerusalem and in the old Holy Land all the way down to the time of Jesus. Even though it got conquered by different nations, they continued to live there. The Greeks defeated the Persians in the 4th century BC, and then the Greek Empire busted up, and Israel was modern day Israel was a key border area between different factions of Greek kings. And then in the 1st century BC, the Romans came and conquered. And then that brings us up to the time of Jesus. So that's a short historical overview. But now, how do cities involve in all of this? Well, let's go back to the beginning with Saul. With Saul, cities weren't that important. But with David, they became very important. Because David, in one of his military conquests, captured the Jebusite capital of Jerusalem. It was a very strategic place, and Jerusalem had not been captured because of its strategic location. But you can read about this in the Bible. But David conquers Jerusalem and then makes it Israel's capital. He moves the Ark of the Covenant and all of the worship from the tent into the city. And there, worship then becomes a permanent place. Or Israelite worship, that is, becomes more of a permanent place rather than a temporary and transient place. God is now worshipped in Jerusalem rather than at Gilgal or Bethel or wherever the tabernacle sits. Instead of a rotting and decaying tent, Solomon then will build God a glorious temple made of stone and wood and gold and silver. So we see now the city being transformed before our very eyes in God's revelation. It goes from a place of mistrust to a place where God dwells, thanks to David and thanks to Solomon. We hear, and if you go to visit Jerusalem today, you will see the area known as the City of David, and you'll see the area that was called where Solomon's temple sat. And we see that this is such an important idea. Now Israel's national identity becomes fixed with Zion. It becomes fixed with Jerusalem. It becomes fixed with the temple, and that is an urban reality. Now people come 3 times a year, not to a tent outside of some little podunk town, but they come to the capital. They come to the city. The city becomes now the center of worship, the center of commerce, because even in Jesus' day, we have the money changers at the temple, but also the center of culture, the center of life. Jerusalem, Zion, and Israel now all become synonymous in a lot of the figurative language of the prophets and the Psalms. Now we see the city taking center stage in terms of it being a representative of the nation and the people as a whole. So with David and Solomon, there is a huge shift in the way that cities are seen. The promise to replenish the earth and to populate it in Genesis, that gets added to a little bit in the book of Numbers with the Levitical cities and the cities of refuge, now come what we would think to be full circle with the idea of Jerusalem as the capital, that Zion is the great city of God. But we do see that. But the old idea of cities as bad places doesn't completely go away. We see cities becoming figurative for people as well in evil places. There are evil cities like Babylon and Nineveh, and to some extent Samaria. Even though Samaria was an Israelite city, it was a place where there was a lot of evil going on. It was a rebellious city because it was a sign that Jerusalem, after the death of Solomon, was no longer unified. It was a place of discord. And the idea of evil even extends to Samaria. But it's not always true. Even in the midst of the evil cities, we see good now happening in them. We see, for instance, in the book of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar's heart turned toward God in the midst of his great idolatrous city of Babylon. We see in the book of Jonah, Nineveh, that menace to Israel, that evil city of Assyria, being a place that Jonah is sent to preach about the coming destruction of the city, and we see the people repenting of their evil. So again, the bag becomes even more mixed. Even though we have evil cities like Nineveh and Babylon and Susa, as we get further into the exile, we still see good coming out of them. We see Queen Esther becoming the queen of the Persian Empire in the midst of the evil city. We see God working change in the hearts of Nebuchadnezzar and the Assyrians, in the hearts of the evil cities of Babylon and Nineveh. So even the city is becoming even more and more redeemed as the Old Testament moves along. And again, I cannot stress this enough for importance. The diaspora, the dispersed Israelite people moving in cities. There's a great change in this period of time of the orientation of the Jewish people. Once they had been people of the pasture land, once they had been farmers, but now they become more and more city dwellers. Now, there are still some Jews who farm, and there are still some Jews who herd, but the vast majority of Jews now, because of the identification of Jerusalem and Zion, now they become city dwellers, and especially so in the dispersion. That brings us to a close of the intertestamental period and the end of this video. The next one we will look at is the New Testament and the city. So I hope you enjoy it, hope you're learning a lot, and I hope this is challenging you to see how the Bible speaks of the city. Have a great day. Bye.